People think you're cold. They look at you and see someone distant, quiet, hard to read. Someone who doesn't react when others would. Someone who stays still when the world around them falls apart. They call you reserved, detached, maybe even emotionally unavailable. And you've heard it enough times that part of you started to believe it. But here's what they don't see. They don't see what happens inside you when someone says the wrong thing. They don't see how you replay a conversation at 2 a.m. feeling every word like it just happened. They don't see the weight you carry from a single look, a single silence, a single moment that everyone else already forgot. They don't see that you didn't feel less. You felt everything, and you just learned not to show it. This video is for the people who are exhausted from being misunderstood. The ones who seem fine but aren't. The ones who care deeply and say nothing. The ones who feel the most and show the least. If that's you, you're in the right place. Pause. And if this already feels familiar, if something in those first few words made you stop and breathe for a second, subscribe before we go further. Because everything we're about to explore, it was made for exactly the way your mind works. Let's start with the truth, not the version people tell about you. The real one. You are not cold. You never were. What you are is someone who learned, maybe very early, maybe very painfully, that's showing too much of what you feel comes with a cost. And so you adapted. You built something quiet on the outside, controlled, composed, version of yourself that could move through the world without bleeding in public. And it worked. People stopped asking uncomfortable questions. They stopped pushing. They started seeing you as strong, as stable, as the one who always has it together. But here's what nobody tells you about that kind of control. It doesn't turn the emotions off. It just moves them inward. Pause. Think about it like this. Imagine a river. Powerful, fast, constant. Now imagine someone built a dam in the middle of it. The water doesn't disappear. It doesn't dry up. It collects. It deepens. It presses against everything holding it back. That's what's happening inside you. The emotions are still there. Every single one of them. Grief, love, longing, anger, tenderness, all of it. Fully alive, fully present. Just contained. And containment takes energy. Enormous amounts of it. That's why you're tired in ways you can't always explain. That's why some days a small thing, a song, a sentence, a memory hits you harder than it should. Because it doesn't just touch the surface. It touches everything that's been waiting beneath. You didn't become cold. You learned to contain what was too much for others. And there's a profound difference between those two things. One is absent. The other is discipline. Born from pain. Pausa longa. People who seem cold but feel everything aren't missing emotion. They're managing it constantly, quietly, often alone. And the world rarely gives them credit for how much that costs. So how does someone get here? How does a person end up feeling everything while showing almost nothing? It doesn't happen overnight, and it rarely happens by choice. There are two paths that lead to this place, and chances are you'll recognize yourself in at least one of them. Pause. The first path. You are always this way. Some people are born with a nervous system that registers the world more intensely than others. Psychologists call it high emotional sensitivity. But in real life, it doesn't feel like a gift. It feels like too much. Too much noise. Too much tension in a room. Too much weight in a glance from someone you love. Too much everything, all the time, without a way to turn it down. You felt things before you had words for them. You picked up on the mood of a room the moment you walked in. You knew when something was wrong, even when everyone insisted nothing was. You absorbed the emotions of people around you like they were your own. And at some point, the world made it very clear. That was too much. Maybe they told you directly. You're too sensitive. You're overreacting. You feel things too deeply. Maybe they didn't say it at all. They just pulled away. Got uncomfortable. Changed the subject, laughed nervously, and moved on. And you learned the lesson without anyone teaching it. Dial it down. Keep it inside. Don't let them see. So you did. You took all that intensity, all that richness, all that depth, and you built walls around it. Not to destroy it, just to protect it, to protect yourself. And slowly, the outside became calm, quiet, unreadable, while the inside stayed exactly the same. Pause of the second path. You learned to close. Some people weren't always this contained. There was a time when they felt freely, expressed openly, reached out without hesitation, and then something happened. Maybe it was a relationship where being vulnerable got used against you, where you opened up and what came back was judgment, mockery, silence, betrayal. Maybe it was a childhood where emotional expression wasn't safe, where crying meant weakness, where needing comfort was met with irritation, where the adults around you were so overwhelmed with their own pain that there was simply no room for yours. Maybe it was smaller than that. A moment in school where you said exactly what you felt and the room went quiet in the wrong way. A friendship where you trusted someone completely and watched them walk away with pieces of you. Pausa longa. Picture a child who learned, very young, not to cry in front of others. Not because they weren't sad, but because every time they cried, the response made them feel worse. So they learned to wait, to go to their room, to sit alone with something that was too big for one person to hold. That child grew up and they got very good at waiting at. Going somewhere private inside themselves where no one could follow at holding things alone that were never meant to be held alone. Pausa. Both paths lead to the same place. A person who feels the world deeply and faces it quietly. A person who has more going on inside them than most people will ever know. A person who looks cold to those who can't see past the surface and who carries the quiet ache of being seen as something they were never meant to be. Now let's talk about what this actually looks like. Not in theory. In real life. In the small moments that happen every single day. Because if you are this person, you already know the feeling. But sometimes it helps to hear it named. To have someone look at exactly what you experience and say, yes, that's real. That makes sense. You're not imagining it. So let's go through it. They feel everything, but show nothing. You're sitting in a conversation and someone says something that cuts straight through you. A casual comment. Maybe they didn't even mean it. Maybe they've already forgotten they said it. But you felt it land. You felt the exact weight of it. The specific way it touched something old, something tender, something you've been quietly carrying for longer than you'd like to admit, and on your face, nothing. Maybe a small nod. Maybe a slight shift in your eyes that nobody noticed. Maybe silence that looked like calm, but was actually you holding an entire storm completely still. People walk away thinking you're fine, thinking nothing reached you, thinking you're made of something harder than they are, and you sit alone later, still feeling it, turning it over, wondering if they knew, wondering if they cared, feeling every layer of something that, to them, was just a passing moment. That is what it means to feel everything and show nothing. Not emptiness. Invisible fullness. They overthink before they express. Before you say something vulnerable, there's an entire process that happens. A process most people never see. You think about how it will land. You think about whether the other person is in the right space to receive it. You think about the 3 different ways they might interpret what you're about to say. You think about what happens if they react badly. You think about whether it's worth the risk. And by the time you finish thinking, the moment is gone. The conversation moved on. And what you needed to say stayed exactly where it always does. Inside. It's not that you don't want to express. It's that expression feels dangerous in a way that's hard to explain to people who don't experience it. Every word you consider sharing goes through a filter. Is this too much? Will this make them uncomfortable? Will they use this against me? Will they look at me differently? And so you say the safer version, the shorter version, the version that protects you, or you say nothing at all. And people think you're hard to know, closed off, mysterious. When really, you just haven't found enough safety to speak. They seem distant, but they're protecting themselves. There are days when you pull back, when you get quiet in a group, when you don't reach out, don't respond quickly. Create space between yourself and the people around you. And from the outside, it looks like indifference, like you don't care. Like you're choosing distance because connection doesn't matter to you. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is the opposite. You care so much that it becomes overwhelming. The connection matters so deeply that the thought of it going wrong, of being misunderstood, of getting someone access to something real in you and watching them treat it carelessly, that thought is unbearable. So you create distance before the hurt can you. Pull back before you can be pushed away. You go quiet before your words can be used against you. Pausa longa. It's not coldness. It's self-preservation. It's what happens when someone has learned through enough painful experiences that closeness comes with risk, and that the risk doesn't always feel worth taking. The distance isn't about not wanting people. It's about wanting them so much that the fear of losing them becomes its own kind of weight. They struggle to trust emotional safety. You watch people carefully, quietly. Before you open up to someone, you observe them for a long time. How they talk about others when those people aren't in the room. How they respond when someone shows vulnerability. Whether their actions match their words. Whether they stay when things get uncomfortable. You're not paranoid. You're not cold. You're not playing games. You're reading the room because you've been in a situation where you trusted too fast and it cost you something you couldn't easily get back. A piece of your story shared with the wrong person. A moment of rawness met with indifference. A real feeling dismissed like it was nothing. And so now you take your time, you test the water before you swim. You look for consistency before you believe it. You need to see someone handle small truths well before you'd ever consider sharing the deeper ones. People sometimes experience this as you being guarded, suspicious, hard to get close to, but what they're really seeing is someone who values emotional safety so much that they refuse to pretend it exists before it's been earned. They are emotionally exhausted. And this one might be the most important. You don't just carry your own emotions, you carry everyone else's too. You walk into a room and feel the tension before anyone speaks. You know when someone is hurting even when they insist they're fine. You absorb the energy of people around you without being able to stop at dot, and then you go home and you process your own day, your own feelings, your own fears and hopes, and the thousand small things that move through you while you kept your face completely still. Dot. It's a lot. Dot. It is a lot. And the exhaustion that comes from this kind of living is real, deep, the kind that sleep doesn't always fix, the kind that builds slowly and sits in your chest like something heavy that has nowhere to go. You're not lazy. You're not antisocial. You're not dramatic. You are someone doing enormous emotional work every single day, in complete silence. If any of these felt personal, if you found yourself nodding, or going quiet, or feeling something move in your chest, leave a comment right now. Just tell me which one hit hardest, which one made you stop, because you seeing yourself in these words, that matters. And a like on this video tells me to keep making content that goes exactly this deep. Now we need to talk about what this costs, because there is a cost. Living this way, feeling deeply, showing little, carrying everything quietly, it takes something from you. Something that doesn't always have a name, but that you feel in the spaces between conversations, in the moments after everyone has gone home, in the silence that follows a connection that almost went deep enough but didn't quite get there. Let's sit with that for a moment. The loneliness that no one sees. This is one of the quietest kinds of pain that exists, because you're not alone in the obvious way. You have people around you. You function. You show up. You engage. From the outside, your life might look full. But there's a specific loneliness that comes from never being fully known, from always being the version of yourself that's safe to show, from having conversations that stay on the surface when everything in you is desperate to go deeper, from being in a room full of people and still feeling like there's a wall of glass between you and all of them. You watch people connect effortlessly and wonder what it would feel like to do that, to just say what you feel without the filter, without the fear, without the exhausting calculation of whether this person can handle what you actually carry. And because you're so good at appearing fine, nobody thinks to ask if you are so you don't get asked. And the loneliness deepens not loudly, not dramatically just quietly, persistently, like water finding its way through. Stone. The ache of being misread. There's something uniquely painful about being misunderstood by the people you care about most. About having someone look at you, someone who matters to you, someone you would do anything for, and see coldness where there is actually tenderness. See indifference where there is actually an almost unbearable amount of care. You've been called distant by someone you were desperately trying to stay close to. You've been told you don't care by someone you think about constantly. You've watched people walk away because they couldn't see past the surface you built to protect yourself from exactly that kind of loss. And the worst part, you couldn't explain it. Not in a way that would have made sense. Not in a way that didn't feel like too much. Not without opening a door. You weren't ready to open. So you stayed quiet and let them believe the version of you that wasn't true. Pause longer. Because sometimes being misunderstood feels safer than being seen and still not accepted. And that thought, that particular devastating thought, is something only people like you will truly understand. The connections that never quite reach the bottom. You know what it feels like to be close to someone, but not close enough. To have relationships that are real, that matter, that bring genuine warmth, but that always stop just before the deepest part of you, just before the place where the real things live. Because getting to that place requires trust you're not sure you have, vulnerability you're not sure is safe, a certainty that what you share will be held carefully and not dropped. And so you live at a depth that most people never reach, rich, complex, full of emotion, but you live there alone. So what do you do with all of this? When you've spent years, maybe your whole life, learning to contain, to filter, to protect, how do you begin to live differently? And I want to be honest with you here. This isn't about fixing yourself, because you are not broken. This is about something quieter than that, something more gradual, something that doesn't ask you to tear down everything you built overnight, but instead ask you to start slowly, carefully, learning to trust again. Not everyone Not all at once, just enough. Start by giving yourself permission to feel without judgment. This is the first thing. And it sounds simple, but for someone like you, it might be the hardest, because somewhere along the way, you learned to judge your own emotions before anyone else could. You became the first voice that said, "This is too much. This doesn't make sense. You shouldn't feel this way." And so the emotions that needed space to breathe got pushed down before they ever had a chance to move through you. So try something different. When something hits you, when a feeling rises, when something old surfaces, when you find yourself lying awake at night, processing something everyone else forgot instead of immediately containing it, just let it be there for a moment. Don't analyze it yet. Don't judge whether it's rational. Don't ask yourself if you're overreacting. Just let it exist. Feel it without immediately needing to control it. Because emotions that are allowed to be felt eventually move. Emotions that are constantly suppressed just find other ways to make themselves known. In exhaustion, in distance, in a heaviness you carry without knowing exactly where it came from. You don't have to perform your feelings for anyone, but you are allowed to have them fully, privately, without apology. Find your people, the ones who can hold what you carry. Not everyone deserves access to your depth, and part of healing for someone like you is accepting that, really accepting it without bitterness, without deciding that because some people couldn't handle what you carry, no one can. Because there are people who can. There are people who speak this same quiet language, who also feel too much and show too little, who also live most of their real life on the inside, who also know what it's like to be in a room full of people and still feel that particular glass wall loneliness. And when you find those people, even one of them, something shifts, because for the first time, you don't have to translate yourself. You don't have to shrink what you feel into something manageable for someone else. You don't have to apologize for the depth of your reaction or the intensity of your inner world. You can just be what you are and be understood. These connections are rare. They take time to find. They require you to stay open long enough to recognize them when they appear. But they exist, and they are worth everything it takes to get there. Stop explaining yourself to people who have already decided what you are. This one is important. There will always be people who look at your quiet and call it coldness, who interpret your careful nature as arrogance, who see your distance as rejection and decide you are simply someone who doesn't care. And there will be a part of you, the part that wants to be understood, the part that aches to be seen correctly, that will want to explain, to defend, to somehow make them understand that what they're seeing isn't the truth of you. But here's what I need you to hear. You cannot explain your depth to someone who is only comfortable with surfaces. You cannot make someone understand a language they have never been willing to learn. And every time you exhaust yourself trying to prove you're not what they've decided you are, you spend energy that belongs to you. Energy that could go toward the people who already see you.
Energy that could go toward your own healing.
Your own life, your own becoming. Some people will not understand you. That is not a failure on your part. It is simply a misalignment. Let them have their version of you. And quietly, steadily, keep living the real one. Learn to express, gradually, on your own terms. You don't have to go from silence to complete openness overnight. That's not healing. That's just a different kind of overwhelm. But you can start. Small. One honest sentence in a conversation where you would usually say nothing. One admission of how something actually made you feel, shared with someone you already trust a little. One moment where you let something real show on your face, instead of holding it perfectly still. And then you watch what happens. Not everyone will react badly. Not every moment of vulnerability will cost you something. Some of them, more than you might expect, will bring you closer to someone rather than pushing them away. Expression is a muscle that got weakened through years of not being used safely. You rebuild it slowly, with care, with the right people, in the right moments. Not by forcing it. Not by performing openness to prove something to yourself or anyone else, but by choosing one small moment at a time to let a little of what's inside actually reach the surface, because you have so much worth saying. So much worth sharing. A depth of experience and feeling and thought that most people spend their whole lives searching for and never find. And the world, the right parts of the world, the parts that are ready for it, deserves to encounter what you actually are. Not the contained version. Not the protected version. We're almost at the end. And I want to use this last moment carefully. Because if you've made it here, if you've been watching this, recognizing yourself in these words, feeling that quiet shift of finally being seen, then there's something I need to say to you directly, not as a conclusion. As a truth. You have spent so much of your life being misread, being the The person in the room that others couldn't quite figure out. The one who seemed unreachable. The one who was labeled difficult or cold or closed off or hard to love. And maybe on the hardest days you started to believe it. Maybe you started to wonder if they were right. If something in you was fundamentally too closed, too guarded, too far inside yourself to ever really connect with another person. The way they seem to connect with each other so effortlessly. I want you to hear this. Clearly, they were wrong. What they called coldness was survival. What they called distance was wisdom earned through real pain. What they called being hard to know was simply you waiting patiently, carefully, with more self-awareness than most people will ever have for something that actually felt safe. You didn't close because you were broken. You closed because you were paying attention. Because you felt things so fully, so completely, that you learned early that not every space deserves that kind of access. Not every person has earned the right to what you carry, and that is not a flaw. That is one of the most quietly profound things about you. Think about everything you've held, every emotion you processed alone in the dark, every conversation you replayed until you understood every layer of it. Every time someone hurt you, instead of exploding outward, you went inward, feeling it completely, carrying it quietly, finding your own way through. That takes strength that looks nothing like strength from the outside. It looks like stillness. Like calm, like someone who doesn't feel much. But you and I both know what it actually is. It is endurance. It is depth. It is a kind of emotional courage that never gets celebrated because it's invisible to everyone who isn't living it. And here is what I want you to take from this. Not a list of things to fix. Not a set of steps to become more open, more expressive, more palatable to a world that never quite knew what to do with you. Just this. You are allowed to be exactly what you are. Sensitive and guarded at the same time. Deeply loving and carefully distant. Full of feeling and slow to show it. You are allowed to take your time. To trust slowly. To need more safety than other people seem to need. Before you let someone in, you are allowed to have an inner world so rich and complex that most people will never fully see it. And you are worthy of finding the ones who will. You are not cold. You're not broken. You are not too much or too little or too complicated or too far inside yourself to be loved. You are someone who learned the hard way through real experiences, through real losses, to be careful with a heart that was always underneath everything incredibly alive. Pause. You are careful with a heart that learned the hard way. And that heart, the one you've been protecting all this time, it deserves to be known. By the right people. In the right moments. On your own terms. At your own pace. Take that with not as something to perform, not as something to prove to anyone, just as a quiet truth you carry alongside everything else. You feel everything, and that has always been your depth, not your damage. If this video reached something in you, if it touched a part of yourself you don't often get to see acknowledged, leave a comment below. Tell me what resonated. Tell me what you've been carrying. Tell me which part made you stop and breathe. Because you being here, watching this, recognizing yourself in these words, that means something. That tells me this conversation needed to happen. And if this helped you feel less alone, please like this video. It's a small thing that makes an enormous difference in getting this kind of content to the people who need it most. And if you know someone, a friend, a person you love, someone in your life who always seems fine but who you suspect is holding far more than they ever show, share this with them. Not with a long explanation, not with a label. Just send it quietly. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can offer someone is simply the feeling of being seen. And before you go, there's another video appearing on your screen right now. If this one resonated, that one will too. I'll see you there.